Satyr by John Wilmot were I, who to my cost already am one of those strange prodigious creatures man, a spirit free, to choose for my own share, what case of flesh and blood I pleased to wear. I'd be a dog, a monkey, or a bear, or anything but that vain animal, who is so proud of being rational. The senses are too gross, and he'll contrive a sixth, to contradict the other. 5. And before certain instinct, will prefer reason, which 50 times for one does err. Reason, an Ignis fatuus in the mind, which leaving light of nature, sense behind, pathless and dangerous wandering ways it takes, through errors Fenny, Boggs, and Thorny breaks, whilst the misguided follower climbs with pain mountains of Whimseys, heaped in his own brain, stumbling from thought to thought, falls headlong down into doubt's boundless sea, where like to drown, books bear him up a while, and make him try to swim with bladders of philosophy, in hopes still t'o'ertake to scaping light. The vapor dances in his dazzling sight, till spent, it leaves him to eternal night. Then old age and experience, hand in hand, led him to death, and make him understand, after a search so painful, and so long, that all his life he has been in the wrong. Huddled in dirt, the reasoning engine lies, who was so proud, so witty, and so wise. Pride drew him in, as cheats their bubbles catch, and makes him venture to be made a wretch. His wisdom did his happiness destroy, aiming to know that world he should enjoy, and wit was his vain, frivolous pretense of pleasing others at his own expense. For wits are treated just like common whores, first they're enjoyed, and then kicked out of doors. The pleasure past, a threading doubt remains, that frights t'enjoyer with succeeding pains. Women and men of wit are dangerous tools, and ever fatal to admiring fools. Pleasure allures, and when the fops escape, 'tis not that they're beloved, but fortunate, and therefore what they fear, at heart they hate. But now methinks some formal band and beard takes me to task. Come on, sir, I'm prepared. Then by your favor, anything that's writ against this jibing jingling knack called wit, likes me abundantly, but you take care, upon this point, not to be too severe. Perhaps my muse were fitter for this part, for I profess, I can be very smart on wit, which I abhor with all my heart. I long to lash it in some sharp essay, but your grand indiscretion bids me stay, and turns my tide of ink another way. What rage ferments in your degenerate mind, to make you rail at reason, and mankind? Blessed glorious man, to whom alone kind heaven, an everlasting soul has freely given, whom his great Maker took such care to make, that from himself he did the image take, and this fair frame, in shining reason doctorist, to dignify his nature, above beast. Reason, by whose aspiring influence, we take a flight beyond material sense, dive into mysteries, then soaring pierce the flaming limits of the universe, search heaven and hell, find out what's acted there, and give the world true grounds of hope and fear. Hold, mighty man, I cry, all this we know, from the pathetique pen of Angelo, from Patrick's pilgrim, Stillingfleet's replies, and 'tis this very reason I despise this supernatural gift, that makes a mite think he's the image of the infinite, comparing his short life, void of all rest, to the eternal, and the ever-blessed. This buzzy, puzzling, stirrer-up of doubt, that frames deep mysteries, then finds 'em out, filling with frantic crowds of thinking fools, those reverend bedlams, colleges, and schools, borne on whose wings, each heavy thought can pierce the limits of the boundless universe. So charming ointments make an old witch flee, and bear a crippled carcass through the ski. 'Tis this exalted power, whose busness lies in nonsense and impossibilities. This made a whimsical philosopher, before the spacious world, his tub preferr, and we have modern cloistered coxcombs, who retire to think, cause they have naught to do. But thoughts are given, for action's government, where action ceases, thoughts impertinent. Our sphere of action is life's happiness, and he who thinks beyond, thinks like an ass. Thus, whilst against false reasoning I inveigh, I own right reason, which I would obey. That reason that distinguishes by sense, and gives us rules of good and ill from thence. That bounds desires with a reforming will, to keep 'em more in vigor, not to kill. Your reason hinders, mine helps t'enjoy renewing appetites, yours would destroy. My reason is my friend, yours is a cheat, hunger calls out, my reason bids me eat. Perversely yours, your appetite does mock, this asks for food, that answers what's o'clock. This plain distinction, sir, your doubt secures, 'tis not true reason I despise but yours. Thus I think reason righted, but for man, I'll ne'er recant defend him if you can. For all his pride, and his philosophy, 'tis evident, beasts are in their degree, as wise at least, and better far than he. Those creatures are the wisest who attain, by surest means, the ends at which they aim. If therefore Jowler finds and kills his hares, better than Mears supplies committee chairs, though one's a statesman, t'other but a hound, Jowler, in justice, would be wiser found. You see how far man's wisdom here extends. Look next, if humane nature makes amends, whose principles most generous are, and just, and to whose morals you would sooner trust. Bejudge yourself, I'll bring it to the test, which is the basest creature, man or beast. Birds feed on birds, beasts on each other prey, but savage man alone does man betray. Pressed by necessity, they kill. For food, man undoes man, to do himself no good. With teeth and claws, by nature armed they hunt, nature's allowance, to supply their want. But man, with smiles, embraces, friendships, praise, unhumanely his fellow's life betrays. With voluntary pains, works his distress, not through necessity, but wantonness. For hunger, or for love, they fight, or tear, whilst wretched man is still in arms for fear. For fear he arms, and is of arms afraid, by fear, to fear, successively betrayed. Base fear, the source whence his best passion came, his boasted honor, and his dear-bought fame. That lust of power, to which he's such a slave, and for the which alone he dares be brave, to which his various projects are designed, which makes him generous, affable, and kind. For which he takes such pains to be thought wise, and screws his actions in a forked disguise, leading a tedious life in misery, under laborious, mean hypocrisy. Look to the bottom of his vast design, wherein man's wisdom, power, and glory join. The good he acts, the ill he does endure, 'tis all for fear, to make himself secure. Merely for safety, after fame we thirst, for all men would be cowards if they durst. And honesty's against all common sense, men must be knaves, 'tis in their own defense. Mankind's dishonest, if you think it fair, amongst known cheats, to play upon the square, you be undone, nor can weak truth your reputation save. The knaves will all agree to call you knave. Wronged shall he live, insulted o'er, oppressed, who dares be less a villain than the rest. Thus, sir, you see what humane nature craves. Most men are cowards, all men should be knaves. The difference lies, as far as I can see, not in the thing itself, but the degree, and all the subject matter of debate is only who's a knave of the first rate. All this with indignation have I hurled at the pretending part of the proud world, who swaln with selfish vanity, devise false freedoms, holy cheats, and formal lies over their fellow slaves to tyrannize. But if in court, so just a man there be, in court, a just man, yet unknown to me, who does his needful flattery direct, not to oppress and ruin, but protect, since flattery, which way soever laid, is still a tax on that unhappy trade. If so upright a statesman you can find, whose passions bend to his unbiassed mind, who does his arts and policies apply, to raise his country, not his family, nor while his pride-owned avarice withstands, receives close bribes from friends' corrupted hands. Is there a churchman who on God relies? Whose life, his faith, and doctrine justifies? Not one blown up with vain prelatic pride, who for reproof of sins does man deride, whose envious heart makes preaching a pretense with his obstreperous saucy eloquence, to chide at kings, and rail at men of sense. Who from his pulpit vents more peevish lies, more bitter railings, scandals, calumnies, than at a gossiping, or thrown about, when the good wives get drunk, and then fall out. None of that sensual tribe, whose talents lie in avarice, pride, sloth, and gluttony. who hunt good livings, but abhor good lives, whose lust exalted, to that height arrives, they act adultery with their own wives. And a score of years completed be, can from the lofty pulpit proudly see, half a large parish, their own progeny. Nor doting bishop who would be adored, for domineering at the council board. A greater fop, in business at fourscore, fonder of serious toys, affected more, than the gay glittering fool, at 20 proves, with all his noise, his tawdry cloths, and loves. But a meek humble man, of honest sense, who preaching peace, does practice continence, whose pious life's a proof he does believe, mysterious truths, which no man can conceive. If upon earth, there dwell such God-like men, I'll here recant my paradox to them, adore those shrines of virtue, homage pay, and with the rabble world, their laws obey. If such there are, yet grant me this at least, man differs more from man, than man from beast.